try to do in the second video of the day is I try to look at the first summary video of the morning, and then I look at the comments, the top comments. And usually it's a person who's found something really helpful to the investigation, or they've made some kind of analysis, or they've done some kind of comment that seems to be the most promising lead from the day. And then I'll start forwarding that. So to give an example is of this morning, I talked about the 650,000 emails, and I talked about modus operandi. I talk about modus operandi a lot because it's the history of past criminal activities or just any kind of activities, human behavior, repeated over and over again. Shakespeare, all past this prologue, they're likely to commit those or act in the same way in the future. So Imran has been in Washington, D.C., and I believe Abid or Omar has also been there since 2004. So none of these things just developed last week, or in terms of spying. We've seen kind of the subterfuges in terms of doing coups overseas through Hillary's different operations with John McCain. We've seen, I've shed a little bit of light on how the convenience store and the hospital network and the kind of the counterfeit drug scheme works, but I'd like to shed more light now on this particular rat line. This is an intelligence gathering rat line, or spying or counter spying, or however you want to say that. So if you don't remember, the modus operandi here is somehow Hillary's getting her emails to Huma, and then Huma's emails are getting to Anthony Weiner's laptop, okay, through this syncing process that we talked about, which was basically all but name admitted by the FBI director yesterday. Now, most people don't know Anthony Weiner has an intelligence background with Israel and knows Ehud Barak very well, and Mossad and so forth, and I'll just kind of leave that to the future. But I would just say this: Anthony Weiner isn't the dolt everyone says he is, and he does have a lot of experience. As a matter of fact, I think he actually led the team that led these Pakistani ISI agents in Washington, D.C. So, if you've watched the news this morning, or this episode this morning, is I will do mainly facts about what the Blackberries were found at this house in Lorton, Virginia at 9667 Hawkshead Drive. I'll say it's Andre T. And I'll identify the witnesses. I'll say that, Imran Awan worked for a wireless company called Lightbridge Communications, which worked for a company called Tech Mahindra, owned by a drug lord in India called Ibrahim. Okay, so all those facts are known. Then I'll go into the modus operandi of actually, if you put a server or a laptop with this desktop syncing software configured for the laptop, it'll automatically sync anytime you get around the laptop if you're using Bluetooth, or everywhere every time you send an email if you're using the radio of the network. Okay, so that's the modus operandi, is you just use the laptop as your way of copying everything, and that way you're not having to forward and leave an audit trail of illegal activity if you're stealing this confidential information. Okay, so here's an email I showed this morning about Anthony Weiner's trusted staff. As I mentioned, Anthony Weiner has an intelligence background. The trusted staff, I said, is the Awan brothers. Here we have an email from Hillary to Huma saying, please send up another secure phone, which is obviously going to be the BlackBerry. We've already established that the lawsuit yesterday named the BlackBerry email accounts. So you've got Anthony Weiner with the Awan brothers managing a clutch of Blackberries. We know that matches up with the physical evidence because they were at his house. This is Imran Awan owns this house. We know that Marine testified that the Blackberries were there and the laptops were there. So we have basically two halves of the Jello box here to make the whole box of Jello, as it were, if you follow the espionage cases of years past and the Rosenbergs and so forth. So now I started thinking about, one of the folks commenting, a guy named Matt, on the researcher on watching the first episode, came back with this analysis of the 90 people that Hillary emailed. And this is what they call frequency analysis or whatever, but you can see that there's 4,488 emails that were sent to Cheryl Mills as the key assistant to Hillary. And then it goes to Jake Sullivan, 4,000, about the same number, then Humra. Then it drops way off when you start talking about the people that do her scheduling, the next three people. They're basically the aides and schedulers. Now, it's important that these people, this information is sent out because combining it with what we learned yesterday, a lot of times Doug Band and Justin Cooper and Lanny, I can't remember Lanny's last name, at the Clinton Foundation would have people call in and listen to State Department conference calls. So pushing that information out is very important. And detailed schedules in the Judicial Watch emails that came out yesterday were frequently pushed out to those people that I just mentioned. What I also noticed that came out of this kind of frequency analysis is how far the fortunes of Philippe Reines had fallen, down to 372. He was a key guy back when Hillary was a senator on the Armed Services Committee. He was kind of the key contact to the military. So he had a close relationship with all the generals and especially David Petraeus and Stanley McChrystal and those folks. So now that she's become Secretary of State, you can see kind of Philippe falling off. And anyway, Matt did an analysis of the top 48. So it immediately took down the possible number of people using these State Department BlackBerries that we've seen earlier, which was 30,666. The number of people in the State Department using BlackBerries is these officially issued State Department BlackBerries could be anybody in the State Department, which is 30,066 people. Well, that immediately dropped the list down to 48, which is great analysis in 5 minutes. But on further analysis, I'd say really it's probably only, if I had a dozen BlackBerries, or let's say 17 BlackBerries was what Hillary had, I wouldn't use a whole bunch on my staff. I already know once I replicate my email and the email that I send out to Jake Sullivan, Huma, and Cheryl, and past giving out my schedule for the day for the guys at the Clinton Foundation in Brooklyn, so people could call in on conference calls, I wouldn't really waste my BlackBerries on any more people inside the State Department. If I'm a New York investment firm and I want the latest and greatest information about what's going on in Washington, I'm not going to pay for anything past 7. Now, what I would want would be the president's BlackBerry. Now, his BlackBerry was stripped down so he could only call 10 people, which I thought was interesting because, again, if I have the Awan brothers, I'm going to go ahead and strip that phone down to limit the number of people that the president can call, so my analysis is going to be like this. It's going to be much easier rather than having to look over thousands of different emails or phone messages. But again, if I'm a New York investor, I want that phone. So using kind of this frequency analysis along with motive, which is another classical investigative technique, we can think maybe Hillary through Dennis McDonough. Dennis McDonough is her key henchman in the White House as the federal or national security advisor, and then the chief of staff through henchman Dennis McDonough. Would they have done that to the president? Would they have automatically been syncing his emails every time he sent an email without his knowledge? Knowing everything I know about Hillary, I would say yes, because she didn't win the presidency. She wanted to still have access to the information of the president. Make sure that he wasn't working around her. I think it also explains a lot of things in the Obama presidency, to be quite honest. And then I started saying, okay, well, let's go through all the people who you would want to have their information, to be replicating their information and spying on them. Joe Biden would be another one. He was a key guy on the Senate Armed Services Committee as well, and that's how this whole series started for me. I was reporting about oil. I wanted to do a pipeline story about the overthrow of Assad for the oil pipeline from Qatar and the UAE to Bulgaria. So that just shows you how the facts can take you in a lot of different directions. But I immediately thought of Victoria Nuland, also a BlackBerry user, and she's kind of the Joe Biden's girl in the Ukraine and Joe Biden's girl in Kosovo. One of Biden's sons has an oil play in Kosovo, and the other has an oil play in Ukraine, oil and gas play in Ukraine. So what I found also interesting was there was only 2 emails between Victoria Nuland and Hillary Clinton. So again, if I only have 17, if there's only 17 or 18 BlackBerries, there may have been a lot more. We don't know yet until the FBI releases the information. But I'm not going to waste them all on all 48 people of my underlings. I'm going to put them out here with the president, with the vice president, and I'm thinking also cabinet members. Maybe Victoria Nuland as well, because she affiliates more with Joe Biden than she does with me. all the people I want to kind of spy on, is the working theory here. Again, all this information will be known once this BlackBerry Enterprise server comes out that the Awans were keeping. Now remember, if you're not familiar with the Awans, they are charged in a criminal investigation with the Capitol Police. So I'm not making this up here. 20 burglaries. There was 20 congressional office burglaries. Okay, so this isn't something that I dreamed up or anything. This has been widely reported that they kept a separate server and that they did these White House burglaries. Again, this is the most sensitive information in the country. The people they worked for, like Andre Carson, sit on the Foreign Intelligence Committee, and that could be very critical in releasing information from the Emerging Threats Subcommittee. This is where all the SEAL raids and drone operations happen. Homeland Security could be very interesting, because if you had a network of spies or a network of people that you had with illegal social security numbers and illegally running convenience stores in a drug network, in a drug rat line, then knowing if Homeland Security was about ready to deport them would be very important, so that you could move them into a sanctuary city. Okay, so that's how it goes. I take the most promising thread, I drill down on it, and then a whole bunch of researchers will follow that thread and will follow the most promising leads every day. So that's how the process works, if you will. And usually as the day goes on, there'll be a little bit more working theory. So we'll start with all the facts, we'll lay out all the facts, and then as we move forward, we'll then start doing a little bit of working theory toward the end of the day to follow in interesting investigative leads, using modus operandi and motive as our guiding lights. And then we'll move down to making conclusions at the end of the day.